Thursday, August 12, PFT Live Hiatus Edition. We are getting closer and closer to the return of PFT Live on Peacock and NBCS. And Monday, we will be back August the 16th. Write it down if you haven't already. And I really do appreciate it. And I'm not saying this sarcastically. I know it sounds like it the way I set it up. I really really appreciate all the emails I've gotten. And I have gotten plenty, especially this week, because I had told people for weeks we're back after the Olympics. Well, some people assumed that meant right after the Olympics. No, August 16. A lot of people in the UK waiting for us to be back on Sky. Monday, 5 o'clock local time. Current information available to me. Peacock, 7 a.m. Eastern. NBCSN, 9 a.m. Eastern. 2 hours every day, every weekday, starting on Monday, August the 16th. Looking forward to that. Looking forward to resolution of the Deshaun Watson situation. He wasn't on my list of things to discuss today until I saw the video that was posted by Sarah Barzhop of ESPN.com, where Deshaun Watson giving into some of the frustration as he's walking off the practice field, saying to reporters, "Why are you out here filming me every day? It's the same bleep." Look, he's human. He's frustrated. But at some level, he needs to internalize that part of it, because the basis of his frustration and everyone else's frustration is his own conduct / misconduct / allegations against him. 22 civil lawsuits, 10 criminal complaints. At some point, something he did, whether he crossed the line or not, but he put himself, based upon the admissions made by his attorney, Rusty Hardin, in a spot where he could be accused of these things. All of this flows from his behavior. And I understand he's allowed to have a human reaction. But when we've heard nothing from him for months, for this to be the first thing we hear, it's a little bit odd. It's a little bit strange. And it won't cause any sort of an outcry for sympathy or good feelings or positivity toward Deshaun Watson. Yes, it's frustrating for him. But look, he showed up at camp for a very important, deliberate reason: to avoid being fined $50,000 a day and to ensure he'll make his $10 million this year. He possibly will be placed on paid leave. Some would say maybe he wants to be placed on paid leave. That alleviates this necessity of having to potentially play for the Texans. The Texans are hoping to have him choose to play. It's all a big mess. And the reality is they can't get what they want for him in trade until some of these legal issues are resolved. So it's an awkward holding pattern. People are frustrated. We saw yesterday the Texans had tried to cut off media access to preseason practices prematurely by closing training camp, and that didn't work. And this may be part of the reason why. They sense the frustration that's been building regarding this unresolved status of Deshaun Watson. Look, there are serious allegations. They need to be properly handled. I go back to March when I say the best thing he can do, get all the accusers in a room, get a retired judge there to serve as a mediator, make everyone feel like they had their day in court or something close to a day in court, make everyone feel like they've gotten justice, allow everyone some closure and to move on. The sooner that would have been done, the better. Now, it doesn't matter. They could do it today. There's still 10 criminal complaints, and there's still, from the perspective of Watson's camp, an inevitability that a grand jury will be convened. We'll see how that all plays out, but it is definitely an awkward situation for everyone involved, creating frustration, as evidenced by that frustration bubbling over for Deshaun Watson earlier today. The Texans opened the season with a game against the Jacksonville Jaguars. The Jaguars opened the preseason with a game against the Cleveland Browns. Both Trevor Lawrence and Gardner Minshew will be playing on Saturday night. Coach Urban Meyer said that earlier today. He also said the competition between Minshew and Lawrence for the starting quarterback job as of week 1 against the Texans is open. Still, after 2 weeks of training camp, no number one. Their unofficial depth chart shows Minshew or Lawrence as the starting quarterback, not Lawrence or Minshew, Minshew or Lawrence. And hey, maybe Minshew has responded well. Maybe Minshew is performing at a very high level and showing that he's the best option. I prefer to be a little more cynical about this. I mean, I've said all the time when it comes to rookie quarterbacks, if you can create some in-house obstacles that the quarterback has to overcome, that gives him a burst of confidence. I feel like I belong. I feel like I can do it because I'm beating out a guy who's played in the NFL. And look at Gardner Minshew's stats. Yeah, the wins aren't there. The guy's played well in 2 years with a bad team. He's played very well. I also think that the Jaguars would love to trade Gardner Minshew. No one has come calling to trade for Gardner Minshew. I think the moment they knew that they were taking Trevor Lawrence, Minshew became available. There hasn't been a serious offer or any offer that anyone has heard of for the Jaguars to trade Gardner Minshew. Remember when Tim Tebow arrived? They put him in number 85. When they started selling the jerseys, they said the jerseys will be made available once Tim Tebow has his official number. They were waiting for 15 to become available. We had believed all along it was just a matter of time before the current number 15, Gardner Minshew, would be cycled off the roster via trade to some other team. That hasn't happened yet. And at this point, who knows where it goes from here? Now, just like the Sam Bradford situation 5 years ago, possibly the current Jimmy Garoppolo situation, Jaguars waiting for that opportunity by way of injury to find a team that wants and needs Gardner Minshew. All it takes is one injury in any of these 3 preseason games still to be played for each team, and the door opens for someone to trade for Gardner Minshew. Or if a team just says, we need a better backup. Dallas, they don't have a veteran this year. They had Andy Dalton last year. They've got no veteran presence, no established veteran presence behind Dak Prescott. Maybe they become the team that makes a play for Gardner Minshew. And these are all things that may go down as we get closer to the start of the season. But propping up Minshew, not a bad strategy. Putting him in a position to thrive in the preseason and look good, not a bad strategy. Maybe you get what you're looking for and you move on from Gardner Minshew. However, the one thing we'll find out on Saturday night, who gets the first snaps to start the game? It's Minshew or Lawrence on the depth chart. Will it be Minshew with the starting offense? And will they keep the starting offensive line on the field for Lawrence? You're going to put the number 1 pick in the draft out there behind the number 2 offensive line? I don't know about that one. We've heard that concern before. And these are all new issues for Urban Meyer, who's been one of the great college coaches of the past generation, one of the great all time. Only 3 guys have won championships with 2 different schools. This is all new to him. We'll see how he plays the cards that have been dealt to him by virtue of the presence of Gardner Minshew and the earning of the number 1 overall pick that became Trevor Lawrence. I mentioned Tim Tebow. Unofficial depth chart in Jacksonville has Tebow, not as the first string tight end, not as the second, not as the third. He is in a 3-player group that is vying for the 4th string. That's not good. Now, I know the depth charts are unofficial, but everybody officially has an unofficial depth chart, and it's all we have to work with. Oh, the PR staff makes it. Well, the PR staff deals with the coaching staff all the time. I'd like to think the PR staff has an idea of where guys currently stand. So Tebow is mired in a competition for 4th string. He at least has to be the 4th string tight end to have a shot at the 53-man roster or the practice squad. I guess he could be 5th string and still get a spot on the practice squad because there's 16 guys. I think he ends up on the practice squad and gets called up at some point and given a chance to play in a game, and we'll see if it can work. Before that, he's got 3 preseason games to prove himself. And maybe it is just a failed experiment. Maybe when they throw a pass in his direction, it'll clunk off of his helmet like it did the only time he had a pass thrown his way playing tight end for the New York Jets 9 years ago. If that's the case, if it just isn't working, if it's time for Tebow to move on, you know what will happen? He won't be cut unceremoniously like anyone else and everyone else who will be cut as the rosters move from 90 to 53. He'll retire from football again. Retired as a quarterback, retired as a baseball player, retire as a tight end before he ever plays in a regular season game as a tight end. But I think it's going to be practice squad. Look at it this way. There's no danger in any other team signing Tim Tebow if he's cut. And if they start passing him back and forth, practice squad to roster, back to practice squad, and there's a certain point where you have to pass through waivers, no one's going to claim him on waivers. So Urban Meyer, in the best interest of the team, shouldn't give a 53-man roster spot to Tebow. Give him a practice squad spot at most, and maybe bring him up once or twice, put him in a game, goal line package, Tebow package, whatever, and see what he can do, and maybe he can stick around. As of yesterday, it didn't look like Michael Thomas would be sticking around the New Orleans Saints. It felt like this thing was inevitably headed toward a trade, and it still may be. It still may be. Charles Robinson of Yahoo reported that Sean Payton and Michael Thomas had a meeting and they cleared the air and things are resolved or whatever. And I'm not trying to demean the reporting. I always know that there's more than meets the eye. And the Saints, I firmly believe, were not trying to damage Michael Thomas's reputation, notwithstanding his tweet suggesting they were, because the Saints, if they're going to try to trade the guy, they want him to be viewed as a valuable asset. They want to maximize the return. They're not going to trash the guy at a time when they potentially could deal the guy to another team. And they need to rebuild that. They need to create a sense that this is a desirable asset for the Saints. You know, I said this before many times. Sometimes your best leverage in trade talks is, we're just keeping him. If it looks like the Saints can't wait to get rid of him, it's hard to get the most that you can via trade, especially if there's only one team out there. And I keep looking at the Jaguars. Michael Thomas, Urban Meyer, past relationship at Ohio State. Now, it's entirely possible that Urban Meyer said, and I've reached my lifetime limit of Michael Thomas. That's possible. And I'm not knocking Michael Thomas here. I just push back against this constant presumption that we connect dots and say, well, these guys crossed paths before in college or at some other pro team. Yeah, there's a chance they hate each other too, right? People rarely come out and say what they feel about other people. There's nothing to be gained from it. So it's possible Urban Meyer has no desire to join forces with Michael Thomas again, or maybe he wants him. Either way, Michael Thomas has shown he's got the skills and abilities to be one of the best receivers in the NFL. There's been a fracture in New Orleans that dates back to last year. Remember, we reported that Thomas's camp was trying to get other teams to make the Saints a trade offer. Now, last year, the cap consequences, impossible. This year, not as impossible. He'd leave behind $8.9 million this year, and they take a $22.7 million cap charge next year when the cap is higher. And look, Mickey Loomis, the GM of the team, he knows how to wave the magic wand and create cap space. So I'm not worried about that if they decide it's in the best interest of the team. But I'm just not ready to proclaim that one meeting between Sean Payton and Michael Thomas reverses months of dysfunction, because any coach is going to be pissed at a guy who just goes dark when you're trying to track him down and find out whether and to what extent he's going to have surgery on his ankle. When's he going to do it? We need to get this done. We need to get you ready for the season, especially when you have the history last year. And this was a Jeff Duncan report that peeled back the curtain on some of the broader concerns that the Saints have about Michael Thomas, the way he interacts with staff, the way he treats some of the employees. So there's been dysfunction there. It got worse in the offseason. And now that it's exploded, it's quite possible that they're just trying to scrape up the toothpaste to try to salvage trade value for Michael Thomas. And time will tell whether or not this is a true reconciliation or just something that we're going to be led to believe is a reconciliation so the Saints can then get a trade offer. And you know what? Maybe what Payton told him, because Payton is capable of being very direct. Maybe he said, look, we can't trade you now. We're not trading you now. Let's focus on having the best year we can. And then if we both believe, if either of us believe this isn't working after the 2021 season, next year, after June 1, that's when we can and will trade you to a new team. Maybe there's been some sort of an understanding in that regard to get him all in for 2021. Just like the Packers said just enough to get Aaron Rodgers all in for 2021. And maybe part of what gets a guy all in for 2021 is if you want out, maybe you'll get what you're looking for come 2022. Derek Carr looking to play a lot longer than 2022 or even 2032. He turned 30 in March. He said yesterday he wants to play until he's 45. That gives us now three quarterbacks who are not yet 45 who have said publicly they want to play until they're 45. One, Tom Brady, who turned 44 9 days ago. Two, Russell Wilson in his early 30s, who has said multiple times he wants to play until he's 45. And now three, Derek Carr wants to play until he's 45. And I'm trying to choose my words carefully here. I've already written it up, but it's one thing to write it and it's one thing to say it. There's a certain presumption when you say that you want to play until you're 45, that someone will want you to play until you're 45. Tom Brady, yes. Russell Wilson, yes. Derek Carr, I mean, if you're at best on the fringes of the top 10 at 30, are you going to be in the top 32 at 45? See, there's just a subtle arrogance to the idea that, hey, I want to play until I'm 45. I can play until I'm 45. There will be a demand for my services until I'm 45. I'm not ready to sign on for that one. I will for Brady. I will for Wilson. Not ready to go there with Derek Carr. First, you got to convince me that there's going to be a team that wants you until you're 35. Then we can worry about 40. Then we can worry about 45. And look, this is the same guy who said last year, I'm going to play with the Raiders as long as I want to. That's not how it works. That's not how it works. We've seen that time and again. And the Raiders, through general manager Mike Mayock, have made the point repeatedly. They're constantly looking for upgrades at every position. The moment that they could feasibly find a better quarterback than Derek Carr, they will go get him. Now, to his credit, Carr has gotten better. He's reached an understanding with John Gruden. They figured out how to coexist. They figured out how to thrive together. They're still not regarded as a short-list playoff contender in the AFC. And hey, in the NFC, I think you could pencil them in for one of the 7 spots. In the AFC, with the Bills and the Patriots, the Ravens, the Browns, the Steelers, the Colts, the Titans, the Chargers, the Chiefs. That's 9 teams for 7 spots. Raiders are going to have a hell of a time. And if they make it, congratulations. But they got a long way to go. And Carr's got a long way to go before an NFL team will want to employ him beyond his 40th birthday, if there is even a team that is willing to employ him beyond his 35th birthday. Time will tell on all of that. All right, that was, I think, as measured as I could possibly be. I mean, at a certain point, it sounds ludicrous. At a certain point, a guy who isn't even a starter now saying, I'm going to play until I'm 45, you get laughed out of the room. Derek Carr is somewhere between Mitch Trubisky saying, I want to play until I'm 45, and Russell Wilson saying, I want to play until I'm 45. And I don't know which one he's closer to, but my point is that's the kind of aspirational talk that should be reserved to guys who are at least in the top 10 consensus, maybe top 5 consensus. All right. Time to answer a few questions. Oh boy, we got a bunch today. I got enough time to get through a few. All right, what do we got here? PFT PM Posse, kind of off topic here. When cops, lawyers, judges, etc., spend their entire careers learning all the laws and the thousands of ways that they can be applied, how and why are regular people expected to know the legal system just as well, not to mention trying to keep up with all the changes happening regularly? Well, look, here's the reality. Ignorance of the law is no excuse. That's a fundamental principle of American life. And it is kind of stupid because how many people even begin to know what the laws are? You're charged with knowledge of things you can't even begin to comprehend, but that's just the way it is. And when in doubt, go get yourself a lawyer. You have to have, I think, ultimately a good sense, and this is instinctive, but it goes a long way from your upbringing as well. Right and wrong. What's right? What's wrong? That little voice that tells you when you're doing something you probably shouldn't do. If it's too good to be true, it may be too good to be true, and it may not be something that you can do. And maybe there's something about this business opportunity that has come your way that doesn't sound right. That's when you need to be sufficiently resourceful, and you have to have the means to engage somebody in the legal profession who can tell you what you need to know. And then you throw on top of it the ability to Google, the ability to search the laws. Think about it. 30 years ago, you got to go to a law library to even begin to understand what the laws of any given jurisdiction may or may not be. Now you can at least, and I find myself doing this when legal questions come up, something I may have never dealt with when I practiced law or something I've forgotten about. You go to Google, you pop in a few terms, you get an idea of what the standard is. But yes, we are expected, all of us, to know what the law is, even though only a small percentage of us ever really do. Another one from PFT PM Posse. On the concept of players holding in, something we've been discussing this week. When teams and players come to an impasse and the team says, we expect you to practice without a new contract, isn't that bad for others to see the leaders and best players not be taken care of and or the star player be a malcontent and a locker room cancer? Well, the best players not being properly taken care of is an issue regardless of whether or not the player is there. It's still an issue. And there are plenty of teams that don't understand that it's always better to reward the guys who have been part of the program and have done all the right things than some stranger to the organization who gets a windfall the first day of free agency because he happened to be in the right place at the right time and the owner has cash and cap space to burn. But if the player is there and the player isn't happy and the player is saying so, this all comes down to how professionally the player is going to handle a situation. Is he trashing the coach, the GM? Is he calling the GM Jerry Krause, for example, as Aaron Rodgers reportedly did throughout the offseason? What messages are those key players sending to other players? But hey, look, you can't take care of everyone. The bottom line is, if you've got a player that you value, you take care of him. If for some reason you think he's not going to earn whatever it is he's looking for, then trade him. Move on. If you're not willing to pay him, send him to someone who will. And if there's someone out there who's willing to pay what you won't and also give you assets for him, you want to revisit your position on whether or not the right thing to do is trade him. Tom Marshall, a Red Zone out. The NFL has started selling tickets for the London games. I've got mine. Will unvaccinated players be allowed to travel? Hey, all of this is a work in progress. We're 2 months away from London games. We've seen how much the world has changed in the last month as it relates to the pandemic. I don't know where we're going to be in 2 months. It could be that unvaccinated players get left behind, aren't allowed to go to London. I don't know. And I think everything at this point is subject to change. And I still think there's a chance, based on how the dominoes fall over the course of the next 2 months, that there won't be London games. You know, it very well could be. And I saw this recently. It's hard to keep up with all the developments, but if we're not letting unvaccinated travelers in, why would we let someone who's unvaccinated out and back in? So anyway, we'll have some clarity, presumably between now and the middle of October. Another one from a Red Zone out, because this Carson Wentz is trending to play week one, just team propaganda. I think there's another question about that coming up as well. Teams are always notoriously optimistic, always. And the glass is always half full. Yeah, every time there is a surgery for an NFL player, what do we hear? Procedure was a success, and the player's already ahead of schedule to return. And look, plenty of pro athletes do end up being ahead of schedule because they've got the bodies of pro athletes. They can recover faster than the rest of us. They are put together in a better way than the rest of us. So maybe Carson Wentz and Quentin Nelson both have better restorative powers than anyone else having that procedure would have. But look, there is a chance that, and let's take a step back. Let's look at what's happened in Indianapolis in recent days. Jacob Eason. Oh, he's great. He's the guy. Oh, wait, Sam Ehlinger, undrafted quarterback out of Texas. He's pretty good too. He's getting first team reps. It could be that this Carson Wentz is trending toward playing in week one talk is aimed at maybe getting the Bears to want less for Nick Foles. You know, because if you're perceived as desperate to go out and find a quarterback, you're going to be expected to give up more to get that quarterback via trade. Vikings had to give up a 1 and a 4 5 years ago to the Eagles for Sam Bradford after Teddy Bridgewater went down a week or so before week one. Why? They were desperate. Everybody knew they were desperate. I remember Rick Spielman bemoaning the fact that all these other teams are trying to hijack him. They're putting their thumbs on the scale because they can. It's supply and demand. So if you can create the impression, if you're the Colts, that, you know, Carson Wentz is good to go, but we just want to have a veteran presence behind him, I still think that having Nick Foles and Carson Wentz together again opens a completely separate can of worms that is worth exploring. But if that's what the Colts are trying to do, whether it's Foles or anyone else, maybe they want Minshew. Maybe that's where Minshew goes. But you have to create the impression that you're not desperate in order to avoid giving up way too much for the guy that you are targeting. Let's see what else we have here. James McDonough, Dr. J 144. Why is Skip Bayless allowed to say what he says without consequence? He's not exactly irreplaceable. I know what would happen at my job as a management levels engineer if I said someone's physical appearance impacted their ability to do their job. This gets to the point that was made yesterday. We wrote a story about it. And I don't have much to add to what I wrote about it. But the bottom line is, at some level, and I'm not saying this is true of every network, but at some level, some networks just want that which will get people to tune in, regardless of whether or not the person is dancing on a line, or maybe from time to time on the wrong side of the line, maybe from time to time not a good teammate. If you deliver eyeballs, you can get away with a lot of stuff. And it becomes a snowball that grows. You get more people to come in, you say more outlandish things. Network's more inclined to look the other way because more people are coming in. So you say more outlandish things, so more people come in. And at some level, it's good for business. It may be big picture bad for business, but the whole industry is premised upon getting as many possible people to tune in at one time. And some networks content to have someone who from time to time may have some takes that make people say, what the hell is that? If it gets people to tune in and see what he's going to say next, it's good for business. Let's see. Oh, good question. Derek Manyata. Why hasn't a single former coach or executive from the Washington football team who is now employed by another team been asked about the sexual harassment issue? Was the holiday news dump that effective, or a sign that beat reporters with access are too cozy with the teams they cover? I would have to take a step back and do a broader look at where everyone is who was part of the Washington football team from an executive standpoint and a coaching standpoint over the decade or so that was part of the investigation. But generally speaking, yes, the way that the league handled the Washington football team investigation, it worked. Wrong as it was, shameful as it was, not asking for a written report, so there would never be any documentation of exactly who allegedly did what to whom, and any assessment of whether or not those allegations are credible. There's nothing. And they dropped it on the Thursday of 4th of July weekend. By the time the world got back to normal the following Tuesday, 5 days later, we'd all moved on. We'd forgotten about it. And, I've said time and again, this was about protecting other owners from being in a similar situation. Because if you put all those details out there, like we've seen the NFL do with other scandals that were thoroughly investigated and that resulted in the crafting of a written report, there could be consequences. And I firmly believe if everything that Beth Wilkinson found that caused the commissioner to reach the conclusions he reached, if all of that had been written up and made available for us to see, the outcry from the media and the fans would have resulted in, I believe, Daniel Snyder being forced to sell the team. The other owners do not want themselves to be in that position at some point down the road based upon accusations that may never be proven in court. And we know what happens. Anytime someone is accused of something in court, their first reaction is, I didn't do it. So if you're accused of it out of court, you're even more likely to say, I didn't do it. I have an explanation for it. It's false. It's unfair. It's wrong. People who are used to having their way in every setting are not going to want to have their future, their livelihood, their fame, their prestige, their ownership of an NFL team potentially hinge on accusations that they would subjectively regard as false, no matter how much merit those accusations may have. Hassan, do you think the Saints are overrated with their season win totals at 9? They aren't that good at defensive tackle, cornerback, tight end, and receiver without Thomas potentially, not to mention the quarterback question. Sean Payton is great, but they went 7-9 3 straight seasons with him not too long ago. They went 7-9 3 straight seasons with Sean Payton because the team, and specifically the defense, was decimated by everything that happened with Bountygate. And I think having Payton gone for a year and all of that upheaval, and then they made some bad decisions about defensive coordinator. Let's face it. They made some bad decisions. Dennis Allen has been great as a defensive coordinator. He can't get a sniff for a second head coaching stint. That's great for Sean Payton. They've had some bad defenses under guys like Rob Ryan. They've got a better defense now. And Sean Payton is the master of taking whatever he has and getting the most out of it. So I think 9's a little low. I think the Saints are going to be pretty good. And that's because I believe in Payton's ability to figure out who the best guys are to put on the field, come up with the best plays for them to use based upon what he thinks will work against the opposing defense. And this is going to be a great test because this is his first full-time starter other than Drew Brees since he became a head coach. So we'll see. But I don't think they're overrated. If anything, I think we can expect more than 9 wins from the Saints this year, especially with 17 games. All right, let's see what else we have here. Nick Andrews, how much of Dan Campbell's media perception is shtick? Look, Dan Campbell is who he is, and it's refreshing. Coaches don't behave like him. They don't talk like him. He doesn't pretend to be anyone other than who he is. And I think a lot of coaches act one way in the locker room and they act a different way at the podium. Campbell acts the same way all the time. It's real. It's genuine. I like it. Some of it is a little over the top. Some of it maybe you should restrain when you talk about biting kneecaps and whatnot, but what the hell? It's entertaining. It's Rex Ryan-ish. I like it. But in today's NFL, with such a hyper focus on health and safety, some of the stuff that takes us back to a rough and tumble quality of football, yeah, it could probably make people in the league office a little bit uncomfortable. Here's another question from Darb Qureshi. Should Canada have a football team? They've got several. It's the Canadian Football League. Now, Toronto was explored at one point as, and I think what Ralph Wilson was trying to do in his final years of owning the Bills, the team he founded back in 1960, he was trying to broaden the footprint beyond Western New York to create a regional fan base that would ensure that the Bills would stay in Buffalo. You play a game or two per year in Toronto, you create a fan base there, you keep the team in Buffalo, maybe you get people from Toronto to come to the Bills games, but it justifies keeping the team in a market that is number 52 right now in the United States and shrinking. Get Toronto involved. Well, the Toronto games didn't work. They did it first, and then they didn't work. I don't know what Toronto would do if we take an NFL team and drop it in there, but it has to be, it has to be one of the Canadian cities that would be considered if the NFL would ever do it. And as the NFL, I think eventually expands from 32 to 34, maybe to 36, maybe to 38. Look, they're going to want more inventory. You can only have 18 regular season games, no more than that. The only way you increase inventory after that, increase the number of teams. You have to be taking Toronto seriously as a potential NFL city. But the question is, if you put a team there, will it be supported by the local fans? Here's one more. RTags39. Should we temper expectations for the allegedly retooled Patriots offense? Your review of their unofficial depth chart should be that the receiver core is still underwhelming, that they don't have anyone special at running back, and Hunter Henry is hurt. What do we expect for this offense in 2021? I expect it to be better. They definitely went out and addressed their needs. 2 tight ends, 2 receivers, and they brought in Mac Jones, Cam Newton, a second year in the offense. The running backs have always been kind of an interchangeable thing, and they'll use the hot hand or the guy who fits best the game plan for the week. I expect the Patriots to be real contenders in the AFC again. They were 7-9 last year with a team that was bereft of talent. In Belichick, we trust, and I expect that team to be very, very good. All right. One more. I just noticed this. Given that Chris Sims was spot on with his lone voice in the wilderness Lamar Jackson prediction from 3 years ago, does he realize he'll have to move to Utah if Zach Wilson is a bust? Sims, a huge believer in Zach Wilson. He sees some Aaron Rodgers, Patrick Mahomes qualities there in the way he moves his body, the way he throws, different platforms, different arm angles. Look, that is the sign of a special amount of talent. The level of competition last year, not great. We'll see what it means at the NFL level. Zach Wilson has struggled so far. He explained it very well recently. This is practice. This is where he's trying to learn what the limits of his abilities are. I trust Sims. Sims has been very good, not just with Lamar Jackson. He's been very good with his quarterback evaluations, guys coming out of the league or into the league every year. I trust him on Zach Wilson. I don't think he's going to have to move to Utah. And if Zach Wilson ends up being a bust, Chris will own it. He'll own it. When he's wrong, he says so. He doesn't try to make it look like, well, that's not what I said, or, it's somebody else's fault that the guy didn't work out. If he doesn't work out, he'll say, I got it wrong. What's wrong with that? It happens. But it doesn't happen very often to Chris when it comes to evaluating quarterbacks. So, all right, that's it for today. We got one more of these tomorrow. And then I leave the cave and go back to the studio for 2 hours a day, every day on Peacock and NBCSN and Sky Sports, PFT Live, coming back in just 4 days. We'll see you again back here tomorrow.